Sorry. Welcome to this workshop that is in the framework of the BISON project. I don't know how many people we have online, but this is okay. So it's a presential, in part presential, in part online. And many of you have already participated in the first edition of this workshop that was held in Paris in the midterm meeting of the project BISON. Yeah. So this is a second step. Even if you participated in the first part of the first edition of the meeting, today you will have the opportunity to participate again in refining the identification of the gaps and the barriers that are hindering the application of the actions to mainstream biodiversity on transport infrastructure. Yeah? We told the first day that we have a huge knowledge, but in these workshops we are trying to identify which are still the gaps and which are still the barriers that we have to overcome. Yeah? So the workshop will be conducted by Luis. So I leave you the floor, Luis.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm gonna just do a short introduction about the goal and the background, as Carme explained, where this workshop come from. And then I'm going to explain a bit the methodology, and then for most of the workshop, we're going to divide, excuse me, we're going to divide in 4 groups that are going to be working in thematic tables with those topics that you can see there, but that I will explain better right now. So these gaps and barriers that you're going to encounter in each of the groups, in each of the thematic tables, sorry, come first for the BISON questionnaire. Like at the beginning of the BISON project, there was a questionnaire that was distributed to several stakeholders all across Europe. And one of the questions was specifically asking what were their opinion, in their opinion, their gaps and barriers that make not possible to mainstream biodiversity in transport infrastructure. A second part of them came with the revision of the good practice that they propose in the same questionnaire. And also, we have inputs from other for other work packages that have been working on legal issues, and they also identify different gaps. So the goal today is to see this list and try to refine them among all of us to reach a consensus at the end of what are the more important gaps that are hindering this the mainstreaming of biodiversity, and also if we can try to identify potential ways to overcome them. So as Carme said, this is the second time that we do this workshop. Some of you will see that the list has been redefined. So we have a huge list at the beginning because we also want to include all the inputs from everyone. In the first workshop were redefined, where the text was changed, depending of what people were suggesting, and they were also prioritized. And today we're going to continue with that process that will end at the Transport Research Arena in November. So in those, the second way I said that the gaps were identified is also by the good practice that the stakeholder and people who fill the questionnaire propose. So that first part of good practices are also being used to being collected to evaluate according to this criteria that you can see there, to do a multi-actor, multi-criteria analysis to select from all those proposals which are the actual best practice that we can distribute and spread. For all of them, there will be, for the best practice that are selected, there will be file similar to that one that you can see there to make it more available to everyone. So now about the methodology, as I say, we will split in 4 groups that we're gonna spend 12 minutes in each thematic table, and then we're gonna be rotating among all the different topics, okay? So if you saw at the beginning, Charlotte was giving you some stickers with the different colors. So then each of the tables or each of the moderators, we're also gonna have one color, so you can just separate according to that. And yep, the 4 topics are going to be about legislation and funding, about governance and communication, tools and procedures, and knowledge and research. I want to say that when you see the list, I know that some of them may not properly, like maybe it's like don't fit on the table, but at the end we have to do the division somehow, but let's try to think farther than that and think if it's important, if it's actually an important gap, if we need to include it or if it's not. So the idea is to reduce this list a bit more to actually find the more important gaps in each of these topics. So yeah, that will be the main question and the main results that we're gonna get redefining this list. So which are the more important gaps and barriers that are limiting the implementation of these best practices? Okay. So we got, sorry, I forgot to say that each of you will have 10 stickers. So the idea is that you use 2 per each topic. So you choose your 2 more important gaps, and then you have 2 extra if in case that in one of the tables you think that someone is really important and want to use an extra one. Okay. Does someone have any question? No. So then we can start dividing. So, sorry. Those who have the brown color can go with Catherine and Andreas to the legislation table, which is in that corner. Those who have the blue sticker can go with Charlotte and myself to the governance table, which is in this corner. Yeah. Those who have the red color can go to table number 3 of knowledge and research, which is this table with Helen and Lazarus. And those who have the green sticker can go to table number 4, which is in that corner with Alex. Yeah. So Carme will be controlling the time, so after 12 minutes she will let us know to wrap up the conversation and move to the next table. Okay, so I'm going to start with table 2, table about governance, communication, and cooperation. First, I want to thank everyone for all the nice discussions that we have in this table. And I'm going to read you the three that were more important for the different groups. One of them, the most voted one, is the unwillingness of actors for changing traditional solutions, although it's been clear that we need to change the word traditional, so we will rephrase that one. The second one has been the lack of education of transport technical staff about potential solutions and actions to mainstream biodiversity, the need for training seminars, special courses or hybrid training. Also with some additions to that one, more topics that we should include in those courses and learning seminars. And the third one has been the lack of knowledge about biodiversity loss. What is the cause of no action? So that will be the three more voted in our table. Thank you.
Sorry, I will be the voice of those that you cannot see. Just to say that within the online group, we also try to work in the same way with dots, but we put more dots on. It was not exactly the same dynamic, and for us in this for table 2, it was more on the focused on the lack of awareness, willingness. It was G3 that was identified as the main topic, and we had also the lack of education of transport technical staff that was identified as a key issue. We have also other topics that have been highlighted, but those are the two main to be done. And on the second part of the table, we also on G15 and G18 with the lack of awareness and knowledge from technical staff once again, with the gap between the objective of the policy and the local action that were more or less.
So our group was about the legislation and the funding, and we have quite an equal distribution, rather equal distribution among the dots given. So the most important ones were probably the lack of policy and standards, regulations on ecological, sustainable, biodiversity-friendly transport, but also the neglecting of the available knowledge. So we lack the policy and we neglect the knowledge that is already there. Lack of standard methodology concerning transport infrastructure impacts on biodiversity. Conflicting policies in how to regulate the multi-purpose areas that transport infrastructure habitats are. We also discussed quite a lot about the lack of funding or the lack of policy that could produce the funding that is necessary to implement measures. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. We almost agree with what was said. We identified first also the lack of standard methodology that was highlighted as one of the key points, and lack of policy standards and regulation too. And on the second part of the table, it was also a lack of awareness, willingness about biodiversity strategies among policymakers, particularly from transport sectors. And yes, it was. Yeah, education and awareness are really...
Hello. So regarding to knowledge, research and innovation, we had some clear winners here. The first one is the deficits in the knowledge and baseline data at large scale, like populations, landscapes, ecosystem services, ecological connectivity, cumulative impacts, or in the access to this knowledge. The other one, which is really important, is the lack of long-term monitoring and dissemination of the results about effectiveness of mitigation and compensation measures. This includes also information about failures. And one more is the lack of research on cost-effectiveness analysis to communicate better with decision makers. We also did some merging between some of the existing gaps. For example, we believe that probably the lack of information regarding the animal mortality due to transport infrastructure, ecological corridors, could be somehow included into the first two gaps that I mentioned before, as well as the lack of information or access to it regarding areas to defragment for compensation ecological corridors. This one?
Yes.
And comprehensive inventories of crossing structures, identifying their ecological role, could be also connected to the lack of long-term monitoring and dissemination.
This is for decision maker with the legal...
Yes, and we have understood that some gaps and barriers that are in this list of the knowledge, research and innovation may overlap with some others or have extension to other domains like the policies and the recommendations and the legal parts. So we will have to look all the gaps horizontally for all the domains and try to identify common aspects.
Okay, for online participants, we have almost the same ranking with deficit in the knowledge, lack of long-term monitoring and dissemination. And third, it was also lack of research and cost-effectiveness analysis. And maybe one small difference, but not so much. It was, we highlighted also the need for research specifically on effect of disturbances. So on the cumulative, it was a key 8. Key 8. Yes. Okay, but we have all the dots here, so don't worry. It will not be lost. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, concerning the tools and procedures, so we had a majority of votes for the need to improve environmental impact assessment method to better evaluate the transport infrastructure impacts on biodiversity. And the second one was the management and maintenance policies and plans to enhance biodiversity on verges and other habitat transport infrastructure. There was also some votes here and there. We have also a group highlighted the need to have an integrated platform addressed to both sectors and at different levels for an effective communication among them. There was a suggestion to merge T20, so absence of a climate change adaptation plan incorporating biodiversity concerns, with T5, which corresponds to biodiversity should be more highlighted when talking about climate change. Yes, and then we had some votes for one vote for T1, difficult access to biodiversity information and data. One vote for the lack of standardized methodologies. And we also had 4 votes for the biodiversity should be more highlighted when talking about climate change. 1 vote for fragmentation and defragmentation concerns that have to be better assessed and complementary avoided and mitigated. And in the last part, we had 1 vote for the lack of control on infrastructure managers in the operational phase. So, and then some feedbacks here and there, though. So one of the points that was highlighted actually was that if the environmental impact assessment will be improved, then there will not be a need to have environmental externalities that are not sufficiently integrated into the decision-making process. Also feedbacks that the environmental impact assessment should be modernized, that we should look at a broader scale also, since some species sometimes it is relevant to look at a larger scale than just around the project side. And I'm talking too much, so that's Yannick's turn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The dynamic was not exactly the same with the online group, so we mostly focused on the first T1 and T2, difficulty access to biodiversity information and data and lack of standardized methodologies, but we had also the expression of the need of an integrated platform that was also addressed to both sectors and at different levels. That was also a very identified as very valuable to be done. And on the second part of the table, we also had a strong will on T20 about the absence of climate change adaptation plan incorporating biodiversity concerns. That was also receiving all the votes from everybody that were online. So it's really one of the main points. Okay. And I just have to say that we had the best group online. So thank you.
I must say on the group we have some of the people that usually we have with us. We have Carme Silvo from Portugal, we have Georgina Alvarez from Spain, we have Marlene Moelans from Belgium, Eric Guinard from France, and many others. So just thank you very much to all of them.
I will share my screen and you will see their face. Just give me really a nice group, and it's also a challenge because... Okay, so it was small but very efficient group. So thank you for them, because it was a challenge also to have these hybrid sessions but the discussion was great. And okay.
Well, I just want to open the floor to anyone that want to add anything about things that, I don't know, anyone that wants to make any more comments or questions? And if not, well, just say that, as we explained before, there is one last step that is going to conduct this workshop at the Transport Research Arena. And then all the results will be integrated and submitted to the European Commission in a deliverable by the end of the year. Hopefully it will be accepted soon, and it will be available at the BISON website for all of you to check.
If we finished, we would like to invite you in our workshop, which is in the Blue Room. Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Which is the title?
Yeah.
The top?
The title is about a recommendation for mainstreaming biodiversity in transport sector.
We also would like to invite you in our workshop in the Yellow Room.
Let's fight.
3 dots for the Yellow Room.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.